welcome to episode number 2 of Dispatches from a World Gone Mad. I'm award-winning investigative reporter Greg Schwartz. This is my attorney, Kevin Dean. We're here to discuss the righteous impeachment of Donald Trump, easily the worst president in U.S. history, very deserving of his second impeachment for his seditious actions against the American people this past week. And so that, unfortunately, must be the topic of our show this evening following his righteous impeachment today.
If you like what you see, please hit the like button and subscribe, and we encourage you to leave your comments in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to respond. And so today the House voted in the second historic vote to impeach a president for the second time in the same term. The vote was 232 to 197, with 10 Republicans joining in the Democrats today. What are your thoughts on the vote today in the House on impeachment, Greg?
Well, the most notable thing about the vote, from my view, amongst those 10 Republicans, was the yes vote of Ohio Representative Anthony Gonzalez, who my fellow Ohio State football fan will remember as a legendary receiver for the Buckeyes, thanks to his incredible catch in a 2005 game-winning drive against that team up north in the Big House. And so we all love Gonzo as a player. Those of us who don't care for the GOP death cult weren't too thrilled about him becoming a congressman in the Republican Party. However, today he broke with the insanity and was, as you noted, one of just 10 Republicans who had the balls or the guts, the intestinal fortitude to stand up and do the right thing and vote yes on impeachment, with Gonzo citing Trump's statement of the MAGA mob. And so some of his followers on Twitter didn't care for my comment complimenting Gonzo for this. And so I was arguing with those bozos for a significant time today. And so, yeah, it's disappointing how many Republicans still refuse to try to see the truth, and they're still trying to whataboutism with Black Lives Matter, which, protesting over people getting gunned down by racist cops is not something that you can equivocate with Donald Trump's seditious incitement of his mob to attack Congress last week. And one of the most hypocritical of these people is another Ohio congressman, one of the most detestable scum in government, Jim Jordan. This guy, what a sleazebag. He gave a nauseous speech today trying to whine about cancel culture. And it's like, well, hello, Jim. Yes, we are canceling Donald Trump because that's what we need to do for accountability. When you don't get accountability from your government, then that's why we have cancel culture, so that the people can deliver their own accountability, and that's where it's at.
And so if you recall the last round of impeachment, there was a lot of discussion as to whether the offenses alleged in round one were indeed high crimes and misdemeanors. This time, there has really been little discussion as to the merits of the claims raised by the Democrats. It seems like a priori, it's decided that Donald Trump did engage in some sort of insurrection or rebellion against the United States. And so if you look at the articles themselves, they're pretty short, right? I think they're like about 4 pages long, maybe 5. And they cite to the article 2, section 4, which lays out what the authority to impeach officers of the United States, which includes the president, obviously. And then it goes to section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which this was obviously the provision of passed after the Civil War to prevent officers in the Confederate Army from coming back and the Confederate government from coming back and sitting in Senate and the Congress after the Civil War. And so the provision states in part, those who have previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution, and they shall engage in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, shall not be eligible as to be an elector or president of the United States. And so there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not these articles of impeachment are twofold, in a sense that we know that it just takes a majority to move the impeachment proceedings along from the House into the Senate. The Democrats have achieved that today. Now the question is, on the impeachment side, will the Democrats muster 2/3 majority vote necessary to oust the president? And there's some discussion as to whether or not that trial is even going to occur prior to Biden's inauguration. And there is a bit of concern as to whether or not Senate impeachment proceedings may delay or throw off Biden's first 120 days and the confirmation of his cabinet. He's already looking at being sworn into office with at least, members of the cabinet already confirmed or prepared for taking their constitutional duties in effect, on day one. And so there is concern again that the impeachment proceedings are going to derail. But then there's a second question as to whether, if the Dems can't get the 2/3 vote, if the vote comes along nearly along party lines, like we saw in the House for the impeachment proceedings, would a simple majority be enough to basically establish as a finding under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that President Trump is now disqualified from running again? So this is
that's a legal question,
wrinkle.
and so I'm not an expert on constitutional law, but yes, we need to move forward with this. If the Senate is not going to have the guts to impeach, if this isn't an impeachable offense, then what is, right? I think we saw a couple Democratic congressmen say that today, because if inciting a treasonous, seditious mob to attack the United States Congress isn't worthy of impeachment, then really what is? It's mind-boggling that they could still try to deny this. And there's still more evidence coming out. We are going to get more evidence about the conspiracy to orchestrate this attack. There's still more information from the investigation coming out. So the impeachment in the Senate is not going to be based solely on just what we had today and what we've been able to accumulate this week. There's going to be more evidence coming in, and I think the Democrats' case is going to increasingly build to a slam dunk. And so, bring it on. Now, as far as overlapping with Biden's first 100 days, I like to quote Bernie Sanders, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so, because we need to prevent Donald Trump from ever being able to serve in government again. And he does not deserve the perks of a president that, he's not worthy. He's not worthy. To quote Wayne and Garth, this guy is seditious scum. He is a criminal, and he needs to be taken out of the picture to whatever extent we can. And so, and then, of course, we've got a lot of problems here in the United States these days with the COVID and the economic depression. And so we're going to need to work big on that stuff. But that doesn't mean that we can just let Donald Trump off the hook. No.
And I think that, that we're even having a discussion as to whether what happened on the 6th is being an impeachable offense or whether or not there really was an intent to incite the riot with the intent to carry out an insurrection and stop the counting of the electors and keep President Trump as president. Whether or not we're even having that discussion is, did this happen? Was it real? After we saw weeks and weeks of these right-wing lunatics claiming that the election was stolen with no evidence, even though these lawsuits are brought in courts where the judges are Republican appointees. It's mind-boggling that we still haven't seen any evidence, and they're still talking about this election being stolen. But what is really just a unique note of the history that all of us survivors coming out of 4 years of Trump is that it seems like, even though it's only been a week, that it happened so long ago that to some people they're questioning the relevance as to what happened on the 6th moving forward. And obviously it's relevant. It's just that is a reflection of the Trump fatigue that this whole country is in, with the absurdity after absurdity, illegality, corruption, and just bullshit that we see on a day in and a day out basis. That we had the president and his followers talking about stopping the vote, stopping the steal, using violence, organizing people coming to Washington, D.C. with Molotov cocktails, tasers that they end up using on their own genitals, and then failing in the effort. You know, as I was discussing with you in the week leading up to the certification of the election, the counting of the voters, and Congress, I was concerned they were going to succeed. You know, if Pence were to play ball with Trump, which I thought he would do because I never thought that he would do anything different, and this were to get in this novel constitutional theory that Pence had the authority to unilaterally decide that the election was fraudulent and not to count the votes. I thought that he had the votes in the Supreme Court to uphold such a step, you know? And so I'm really surprised that Pence didn't play ball, that McConnell stood up, and they're looking to move their party past Trump. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the impeachment proceedings and see how McConnell votes and his colleagues vote. But today, it doesn't give me much hope. You know, we've seen some reports that McConnell was allegedly mulling over voting in favor of impeachment. I think that's all BS. I think that these Republicans, at the end of the day, are not going to hold Trump accountable. And
the problem is they're afraid to hold him accountable.
More interesting question to me is what will be the legal impact of a majority vote, given that we have the invocation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
We have heard reports of Republican congressmen admitting that they're afraid to challenge Trump because he'll rile up his cult base to attack them. Like, people are afraid not just for their political careers, but for their actual physical safety, because they're afraid that these delusional cult members will come after them. And so that's the real danger of Trumpism that is very much still with us, and it's going to be a problem moving forward. And that's why we need to eradicate this horrific cult as best we can by absolutely taking Donald Trump out of the picture. He cannot be allowed to remain an influence in public life. And so this guy is a criminal. He's a gangster. I think we're going to find out more about how he's been in league with Russian gangsters. And I still want to know why Reality Winner, the NSA whistleblower who released documents that seem to suggest some Russian interference. I think the whole Russiagate thing was a bit overblown, but Reality Winner, you know, why is she still not allowed to talk to reporters? I think this is very important for early in Biden's administration to pardon her and get to hear her whole story, because the Trump regime has been covering that up for 4 years. And so we need to hear what Reality Winner has to say. And that's going to be an early test of how much of whether Biden is going to be doing the right thing or remain a puppet of the NSA and the military-industrial complex and all that. And then it's just
So you raise a couple interesting points. Okay, first is the idea, you know, of personally incapacitating Trump from future political office. You know, I personally think his age is about to do that. He seems to be about as mentally competent as Biden. You know, so we can all critique Biden's mental competence comes with his age, but aside from that, though, his followers aren't going anywhere, and we know now more than ever that they are not armed with any kind of information, but with whack conspiracy theories, right? And so, so my question is, let's say that either through the 14th Amendment or through the impeachment process, there's some sort of political bar to Trump running from office again. Do you really think that that's going to end the Trump movement, or will it just fuel it? And consider this. The current conspiracy analysis as to why the Democrats and why Pelosi is pushing impeachment is that they're trying to shut Trump up before he just goes into a massive declassification of documents, of dirt on both establishment Republicans and Democrats. Now, I don't know exactly what kind of documents they're talking about. Trump threatening to declassify.
Who's talking about that?
The entire right-wing conspiracy universe is
Oh,
saying
okay. That's
that,
because they're delusional cult members. That's because they still believe that Trump is an outsider taking on the deep state, which is absolute bullshit. He was never an outsider. He was never taking on any deep state. And so that's just part of their whole delusion. He's not going to be doing that. Remember when he said that he was going to give us the JFK files, and then he backed down like a little wuss when they told him no. And so, that's the real Donald Trump for you. He's all bluster. He's not outing classified files on anyone. I don't see that as any kind of legitimate concern. However, just merely say we can bar him from government. Yeah, Trumpism isn't going away because we have all these delusional cult members that have been created by the right-wing media echo chamber. And so we need to take serious steps to fix the media, because I think we touched on this last week. You've got 6 corporations that own 90% of the media, and so you've got half the people are getting the right-wing news, and then the other half are getting left-wing news, and there's very few in either subsector who are really digging in to get the independent news, because people rely too much on corporate news.
and that's where I would try to correct you there on the left-wing news. I mean, I have this argument with people all the time that MSNBC is not left-wing news. This is
no, they're not.
News. It's corporate.
They're centrist corporate news. Yeah.
Right. But it kind of gets me to another topic. Given our Gonzo theme of politics, rock and roll, and music. What do you think about the outlash that Zach Deputy has gotten online for appearing at the Steal the Vote rally in support of President Trump?
Yeah, that's been interesting to see. I think that Zach Deputy is a whiny little snowflake, because in his video that he posted the other day, he was just reciting the typical Trump cult member complaint that the election was rigged, and he said that was something about how they didn't even listen to the lawsuits. Well, hello, Mr. Deputy. The reason that the lawsuits were tossed out is because they had no basis. There was nothing legitimate to consider, and that's why lawsuits get tossed out and not considered. And so these cult members, though, it doesn't matter what happened. Trump keeps telling them it was stolen, and they just buy it. And so, yeah, I don't know what the answer is there. We have to address these low information people. They mean well, right? You can see he's talking. He's trying to like show you his sensitive side, and I'm sure he probably thinks he means well. But these people who keep pushing this election fraud narrative when there's no evidence for it, it's just they don't know how to separate fact from fiction. And so it's just another step from there to the deep delusional rabbit hole of the whole QAnon thing, when the most preposterous conspiracy theory of all time that tries to tell us that Trump is this outsider taking on the deep state, and even the cult members who don't buy necessarily into all the pedophile, cannibal nonsense, they still push that bigger lie. The bigger part of QAnon is that Trump is this outsider taking on the deep state, and there's almost everyone who supports him believes that bullshit, and it's preposterous. If Trump was an outsider taking on the deep state, he wouldn't have those neocon retreads and those skull and bones scumbags. Steven Schwartzman from Blackstone, this guy's been one of Trump's biggest funders, and he's had Steve Mnuchin, head of the Treasury, to take charge of looting the Treasury for the 1%. These guys are as inside as it gets. So that completely debunks this ridiculous idea that Trump is an outsider. A billionaire is an outsider? No, it's just nonsense. You tell them, and it just bounces right off them. I don't know how to get through to these people.
I agree. I don't know how to get through to them either. I mean, unfortunately, given where I'm from in Ohio, lots of people that I grew up with have become. They've gone from apolitical to politically rabid, and they're fomenting at the mouth based on idiocy. And it's really difficult to win an argument with idiots, I have to say. But we know that pushing 50% of the population supported Trump, and that they continue to support him. And they're going to see this impeachment process, regardless of how it ends up, as illegitimate again, and furthering the myth of martyrdom that Trump has perpetuated, that, he's been treated worse than any other president, including the 2 that have been assassinated and another or 2 that has been shot, right? Not promoting assassination, just saying it. I think people who died or were killed have been treated a little worse than Mr. Trump, who basically he's just had people calling him out for his bullshit for 4 years. But what the question is, these people are going to remain in this country, and some of us may have difficulty, just getting rid of or throwing our friendships with our family and friends to the side, particularly after this presidency ends. Maybe they've been strained over the last 4 years. But, the themes, the reasons why working class people supported Trump, if we examine those themes, distrust of the government, concern for the future of the working class, albeit in a racially biased and hateful way, in my opinion. Those 2 types of themes are legitimate themes that in the past left-wing populists have done a better job of addressing. But we're in the age of right-wing populism. And you talk about
populism.
But you talk about the role of larger secret societies establishing that Trump's presidency, his campaigns, and his administration have been part of the Skulls and Bones conspiracy, right? Wouldn't you agree, though, that a broader scope of the Skulls and Bone conspiracy is to divide working class people against themselves? We're in the middle of a class war, and the way to win a class war is to divide the working class against itself. And the Trump administration has done a better job of dividing working class people against themselves than anyone could have ever imagined. And by playing into this partisan bickering and arguing, I agree, we can't equate treasonous behavior with partisan bickering. We need to identify that and deal with that. That's a separate issue. But moving forward, though, it's to just discount these people because they are stupid, uneducated. But can't the stupid and the uneducated become educated? And can't we enlighten them? How do we do that? Because if we don't take those steps, we're never going to bring the focus back, in the sense that we have a world that has gone mad and is being run into an ecological catastrophe, and the entire future of the human civilization is on the brink. And the only way that we're going to resolve it is if we come together and find solutions that recognize that we need to put the human race back into ecological perspective. And how can we do that if this is a left-right question, and even on the left, we can be redefined by corporate interests that we're already seeing happen with the refuting the policies of the Green New Deal under the Biden administration.
Yeah, the whole problem of how do we try to educate these people. It's why I even bother arguing with them on Twitter, like I was today with these on Anthony Gonzalez's Twitter feed. With the right wingers who didn't like me complimenting him for standing up for impeachment. And there was one guy who was trying to talk about family values and pro-life. And I'm like, how can you say that you're for family values, but you don't give a damn about the Trump regime destroying the EPA to give big polluters a free pass to poison our land, air, and water? This disconnect, I don't understand it. I think it's connected with how they don't get science, or they don't believe science. That's why they don't believe in climate change, because they buy all the propaganda that big oil and the fossil fuel monopolies have poured into convincing people that climate change is a hoax or not human created. And so there's just this massive disinformation campaign out there to keep people in ignorance, right? These people are not all bad people just because they voted for Trump. A lot of them are just incredibly delusional and misinformed and downright ignorant. And so cutting through that ignorance and delusion is become harder than ever because of the social media echo chambers, I guess. And one guy tried to say He stopped watching Fox because they became a lib network. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's hard to understand how these people think and come to these conclusions. And the whole EPA thing is just really like steams my bean like nothing else. I do a lot of reporting on environmental justice, and and you try to throw it back at them and say, how can you sign off on that? And then they just kind of skirt the issues. It's just, and then of course this also ties in to the fact that the Democratic Party has been complicit in the bi-hegemonic duopoly's corporatocracy race to the bottom. And so Obama turning out to be a Wall Street puppet from day one, which was proven by the Podesta emails that showed how Citibank's Michael Froman picked almost his entire cabinet weeks before he was even actually elected. That was quite enlightening. And so, a lot of people are rightly disgruntled with the sort of faux populism of Democratic elites. And this brings me to a quote that I'd like to share from Daniel Pinchbeck, who is a visionary author and thinker on the left. And he's been very cynical about the Democratic Party as well, although what he's saying here today is he's starting to see some light here. And so he says, I tend to take a more cynical view, particularly after the Obama years, which seemed a disaster to me. Obama swept into office in 2008 with a tremendous progressive mandate, but he failed to accomplish anything significant over 8 years. In fact, wealth inequality increased during his time as the U.S. became the world's #1 oil producer again via fracking and other unconventional methods that caused intense ecological destruction, while he continued U.S. drone strikes and covert military operations around the world. The working class felt deeply betrayed by Obama's faux progressivism, which provided the opening for Trump. I found this speech by Obama after he left office at the James Baker Institute to be revealing. Obama was a puppet of Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, and the oil companies. There is no reason to think anything different of Biden based on his record. Sad but true. One more paragraph here. My tendency has been to dismiss U.S. electoral politics as a stage-managed spectacle. However, it is now clear, with the Georgia victories as well as the power held by left-leaning congresspeople like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that at least on the local level, we can build counterpower to the right wing via the electoral system. It takes extraordinary efforts like that made by Stacey Abrams in Georgia to address the systemic corruption, gerrymandering, voter disenfranchisement, and so on, but we now know that it can be done. It is conceivable that a significant leftward shift can be engineered through the electoral system. I intend to support this movement in the future while still promoting more radical and visionary projects. In fact, it is this threat, which is partly a demographic inevitability unless the U.S. implements extreme xenophobic policies, that the plutocrats backing the far right fear and which they are seeking to prevent through increasingly violent means.
So I value Pinchbeck's opinions, but it seems like we have this every time. I mean, if you look at the 20th to 21st century, every time we have a social movement, becomes a new, the theory is that now finally this social movement is going to lead to the political change that we want. Let's take this energy from the social movement and put it into electoral politics. And here's an example. What he's doing is he's talking about social movements in Georgia. Social movements that ended cash bail in Georgia, working to end cash bail in Georgia, that are they're reshaping the criminal justice priorities in Georgia, and that are leading to real on-the-ground local changes in Georgia. He's suggesting that is proof that it can result in electoral change for the progressive orientation. All we've seen so far is it could lead to a split Senate that will be in the Biden administration. He starts his comments by noting that Obama was not a progressive and that he was a capital stooge. And he ends with the idea that a big social movement gives him hope that Biden's administration is going to be any different. I'm sorry, but I'm going to paraphrase Emma Goldman. If voting were effective, they wouldn't let us do it.
And that's why they take so much effort to try to suppress the vote. Voting is effective, but they try to suppress it. and they try to suppress progressive candidates. And so, yes, these are long-time historic problems. But I have to strike back against people who just continue to be so cynical because, yes, we got fooled by Obama, and now we know we won't get fooled again. Well, a lot of people were, and I'll admit that I wanted to believe. I wasn't like total. I wanted to believe, like Fox Mulder. I want to believe. He gave those great speeches in Chicago and Denver that sounded just so progressive and passionate. And so, we saw now that we didn't get much with him. And so I think Joe Biden knows that the gig is up. We see through him. There's going to be no honeymoon for Joe Biden, and rightfully so, because of how we got duped before. In addition, a big difference between now and 10 years ago is the growth of the Democratic Socialists of America, which has far surpassed the Green Party or any other entity on the left as a progressive political force for organizing to push the Democratic Party to the left. The squad had 4 members elected in 2018, and now they're up to 6 or 7. And so this is growing, and DSA is growing. And so all our problems are growing. And so we know that we need to take action. And so let's give the new Congress a chance. Let's give Biden a chance to show he knows that the score is different this time and he needs to deliver big. And so let's get it done.
So let me just clarify my position on that. I think you're aware of it over years of our discussions, right? I don't think that voting generally takes much effort. Obviously,
it's the least you can do, voting every 4 years.
And I say that as a white man who can vote easily in this country, and I recognize that other people have a different experience with voting and are systemically, facing oppressive efforts to deny them the vote, and I don't support that, right? But and I think that in the context of what we've seen from Trump and the Republican Party is that voting should be a duty of folks just to stave off the worst kind of fascism. I also think that liberals are fascists too, and my concern with just turning a blind eye to the history of the Democratic Party. Co-opting social movements and saying that we should give these people just a clean slate and the benefit of the doubt and let them see what they can do moving forward. I don't see the benefit in that, and I think that
that's why it's no honeymoon.
Okay, and where the benefit is though is I think is identifying issues and working and organizing around issues independent and separate from political identity. And,
absolutely.
And that gets back to this discussion. What do we do with the half of the country that are going to be hung up on Trump's ouster and a feeling that the Democrats are all corrupt? Well, my advice to the Democrats is just forget about gun control for the next 4 years. Don't even say gun control. Let's not even talk about gun control.
Right.
And then let's talk about specific issues that working class people care about, including the environment in a way that isn't and the thing is that if you have that discussion moored or connected to partisan identity, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we started a little bit with this division discussion talking about Zach Deputy. I would like to just quote Neil Young, at least I think it's Neil Young. It was on his Facebook page talking about his views on what just happened. I just want to quote a couple paragraphs from him. And he's talking about, he said, this to me is beyond our own feelings that our president has betrayed the people, exaggerated and amplified the truth to foment hatred, resentment of the Democratic Party among the insurrectionists at the Capitol was rampant. We don't need this hate. We need discussion and solutions, respect for one another's beliefs, not hatred. And then he goes on to say, I still have my strong beliefs. This has not changed, but now I feel empathy for the people who have been so manipulated and had their beliefs used as political weapons. I may be among them. I wish internet news was two-sided. Both sides represent on the same programs. Social media at the hands of powerful people, influencers, amplifying lies and untruths is crippling our belief system and turning us against one another. We are not enemies. We must find a way home. And so I think of what Neil Young is talking about in the context of so many of our friends within the music scene just slashing and going after Zach Deputy. Do I agree with what Zach Deputy said or did? Absolutely not. Do I think Zach Deputy is, at least politically speaking, a moron? Absolutely. Will I attend a Zach Deputy show? I don't know. I'm so music starved at this point. If the only option was a Zach Deputy show, I'd probably go. Right. I mean, I am like jonesing for some live music at
Well,
this
we
point.
all are, but by the
But
time touring comes back, you're going to have options. And so, are you going to buy? Are you going to give money to someone who is pushing this insanity of Trump's MAGA cult? No, right? And this is the same reason. One of my childhood heroes, Ace Frehley, the original guitarist from Kiss, he came out for Trump last year, and I was just like, "Oh, Ace, no, say it isn't so." And I kind of had a clue that he was going that way when he made an earlier comment a couple years ago about how you should still respect the president just because he's the president. I'm like, no, Ace. When your president is a neo-fascist, racist, xenophobic grifter, no, you don't need to respect him. And so I will not be giving Ace Frehley another dime. And so that pains me, but I'm not going to support that. And so, and the Zach Deputy, it's unfortunate because, yeah, he kind of fits in more with the jam band culture a little bit, but I think he's going to find that he's going to have a few less fans because of this. And, it gets back to cancel culture, right? Cancel culture is not some kind of arbitrary thing to silence people. No. Cancel culture is accountability. That's what it is. And if you're going to have nauseous, toxic views and support nauseous, toxic people, then you know what? You might not be able to push your product to the masses like you did before. And that's just the way it is. But getting back to what to do, how to get through to these people, I think those 10 Republicans who voted yes for impeachment, we need them. We need them to keep speaking out to their base because you already have Anthony Gonzalez. You have people on his timeline calling him a socialist or saying they're going to vote him out now. And, that'll be interesting to see how many of these 10 people will be able to survive this. Hopefully, we need some moderates in the Republican Party because they all became a bunch of far-right delusional cult members for the most part over these past 4 years. Another one who I would like to name is Adam Kinzinger from Illinois. He was on Stephen Colbert last week, the day of the riot, and he was really speaking sane stuff that I was just like, wow, I haven't heard a Republican talk in such a sane way and since I can't remember when. And so I think that's the key. These people have to step up and start educating their base so that they're not so delusional and off in just their own right-wing echo chamber of these baseless conspiracy theories. And that,
I just want to say one thing to that. As far as needing people to stand up and to speak to people that will listen to them about what the truth is, I absolutely agree. As it relates to holding people accountable, I absolutely agree. And for that reason, I probably will not go to a Zach Deputy show unless something very strange happens. But as it relates to needing Republicans and needing even those 10 Republicans, I disagree. You sound like Joe Biden when he was telling the American people that we need the Republican Party. We don't need the Republican Party. We don't need the Democratic Party. We don't need political parties. What we need is a discussion on ideas that is centered in fact, reason, and science, and the ability to address those things at the same time, holding accountable those who refuse or reject science and reason. So that's what we need. We don't need Republican.
Absolutely. When I say that we need them to step up, I'm talking short term. You're talking long term project right there to get these right wing cult members to respond to facts, logic, and reason. Okay, that's going to be a long road from where we are now because we've been going 4 years the opposite direction down a very dark path. And so, yes, that's where we want to get to. But for right now, we need those people who consider themselves the moderate Republicans to try to educate their base so that so that they're actually people instead of a cult. We have to do something about this cult. And so that is going to conclude tonight's episode of Dispatches from a World Gone Mad. If you've got ideas on how to deal with this cult, we'd love to hear them. Comment on our YouTube page or our Facebook page. Like and subscribe to our YouTube page and Facebook page. And we'll see you next week on Dispatches from a World Gone Mad.